Okay, I want to talk about the elephant in the room with this case because there's a lot of noise out there, and if you're new to the channel, I am a car dealer. So it's a bit of a unique opportunity to hear from someone who's on the other side of this, should we call it battle? There is something that's been missed that I think is really, really important, and I think is going to affect what happens at the end of this case. So if you're not already aware, there's been a Supreme Court ruling yesterday on whether or not there has been mis-selling of car finance. And I'm going to go into that in some detail, but I'm going to focus on something that is really important on this that I think that everybody has missed, and I think is going to massively affect what happens moving forward. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to the channel. Let's get into it. This is a car dealer's opinion on what is going on with the mis-selling of car finance. Okay, so there's been a huge amount of noise about this over the last few weeks, months, and I think we're even into years now. And to be fair, I think there's been some pretty serious mess-ups here from finance brokers, from finance companies, and from car dealers as well. So I'm not doing this video burying my head in the sand and saying that car dealers are all innocent, because we're not. However, there are some crucial points here. So essentially what has happened yesterday in the Supreme Court? In a nutshell, from what I understand, and don't take all this as gospel, it's just my opinion, but there are a couple of cases that went through, 2 out of the 3, the third one being the most poignant that I'm going to go on to in a second, and it's all to do with how Finance Commission has been disclosed. So the first one was, should the commission have been disclosed in the first place to the customer? So regardless of how much commission it was, should it have been disclosed in the first place? And the argument was that yes, it should, and customers should have been aware that there was going to be some form of a payment made to a car dealer and a finance broker for providing car finance. We can't use the word selling because that is inappropriate. And what the courts basically said is, no, we probably all knew that anyway, so we're going to throw that one out, which was surprising because usually the courts will always kind of err on the side of caution and favour the consumer. So I was quite surprised that one got thrown out, but it did. The second ruling was to do with independence and whether or not a car dealer should be working independently. So a bit like a financial advisor, and it's kind of, if you don't already know, I worked in finance prior to this, so I've got a little bit of understanding as to what independent is and what Tide is. So should they be working independently, and should they be working in a way where they're going to the whole of the market, a panel of providers, and trying to find the best interest rate for a customer? Now, caveat. We do that anyway, and a lot of car dealers do that anyway. What they've basically said is that actually there was no assumption that they should have been independent, and if you're using just one finance company, then yes, there is some form of a commercial benefit to do that, and actually that's got ruled out as well. So they're the two things that went through court yesterday. And as far as I'm concerned, I was a bit surprised about the first one, about the non-disclosures and not showing you commissions. I wasn't overly surprised about the second one. So when we worked as financial advisors, I actually worked as a Tide advisor, so I wasn't fully independent, which means that I didn't go to the whole of the market every time. I had a panel of products that I used, and I'd researched them, and the company I worked for had researched them, and we felt that they were right and appropriate for our clients. Now, some financial advisors that say they're independent, in my opinion, aren't, because they have their favoured panels anyway, but they have the option to go to the whole of the market. It's a weird one, and I certainly don't think that's going to filter through into car sales and finance provision during the car sales process. However, this is the elephant in the room, and this is the biggie from where I'm sat. So I'm not trying to defend car dealers at all. And I've got to be very careful here not to look like I'm either defending the car dealers or the public, because I've got friends that are car dealers, and I am a car dealer, and I've got friends that are the public. So I'm trying to sit in the middle here. But can I just say, first of all, that this third case that's going to be going through, which is all to do with the level of commission that has been paid, I think is an important case to be heard. Now, some car dealers, and in a lot of other industries, what people have been doing essentially is bulling up the interest rate so that they can earn more out of the deal. I know this is true because before I was selling cars, when I was a financial advisor, I went to go and buy a Mercedes from a place in Manchester. And they said at the time, I think the interest rate was 9.9%, and I went out and I looked for a loan. I got a loan for the car in the meantime, went back in to pay for the car, said, no, don't want your finance, it's too high on the interest rate. They went, oh no, we could do it at 7.9. So I know from personal experience that this has been happening. It's nothing that I've ever done. genuinely, and it's not something that a lot of my friends have done, but I know it's been fairly common within the industry and lots of other industries, for the record. Now, what this third case is essentially going to be doing is talking about whether or not that's been fair which it isn't, let's face it, and whether or not there's a ruling there and whether or not there should be some form of compensation. Now, there's obviously all of these ambulance chaser businesses that have grown on the back of this, a bit like the PPI scandal. They're all trying to dive on the coattails of this case, and it looks like what's going to happen is there's potentially going to be an investigation from the regulatory body, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, previously known as the Financial Services Authority, the FCA. And what they're going to be doing is creating some sort of a redress scheme. So they're going to be, it looks like, automatically refunding commissions if applicable. This is the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. And as a car dealer, I know this to be true. Every year, when we do what's called a Gabrielle report or a Gabrielle return, we essentially report back to the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator, and we say, these are how many cars that we have sold using finance. These are the number of deals that we've done, and this is the total amount of commission that we've earned on the back of it. And what they essentially do is they look at all of that, and based on how much commission we have taken on all those deals, they will take a proportion of that. Now, forgive me for sounding critical here, but has the regulatory body indeed been profiting on the same type of business they are now investigating? And that is the problem, I think, with this third case, because talk about throwing stones in a glass house. If you are running a business, which I know it's a government business and it's a regulatory authority, and it is earning money or creating revenue on the back of the practices which you have been allowing within an industry which you are meant to have been regulating, and you're now going to create some sort of redress for the customers that have been paying for this, is that not a little bit hypocritical, for want of a better word? Now, again, for the record, I think what's been happening has been wrong. And I've spoken to people in the industry, and apparently there were cases where a dealer or a finance company could put in the box how much commission they wanted to earn out of the deal, and that would then give them the interest rate. In my experience of working as a financial planner and genuinely trying to do the right thing for our clients, that is pretty barbaric. So I genuinely think there's a case here, and I genuinely am on the side of the consumer. I mean that wholeheartedly. Even as a car dealer that's going to be under the cosh for this, fortunately, never been involved in it, but we are probably going to have reporting to do and probably a load of work to do on the back of it to prove our innocence. However, I still think it's right for the consumers that this is forced forwards. However, the elephant in the room again is the regulatory body that has been governing this has also been profiting from this. So the question is this going to be brushed under the carpet because the regulatory body themselves don't want to be thrown under the bus? Or is this going to go ahead? Will there be some form of a compensation, to use a better word, for customers? And are the FCA going to be paying out claims themselves? Or is it all going to be passed on to the finance companies? And this is the real uncertainty that is within this final case. So this is going to be really interesting to watch. I feel comfortable in my position that we weren't involved in it, so we're okay. But I think this is something that no one's talking about and is going to be really interesting to see moving forward. I think if it gets brushed under the carpet, it says a lot about what's been going on. I think if they don't get involved and make a payment, then they've got a huge amount of explaining to do with the people that they've been regulating in the background. So, bit of an interesting one. One bit of advice that I saw online is these companies that have been doing this, have you been missold for car finance, etc., etc. And there are, by the way, a lot of influencers on YouTube that have been diving on the back of this as well, and I can only imagine being paid a huge amount of money to have their faces popped up. A little bit of egg on your face with that one, lads. I mean, we're really careful with what we influence and what we kind of show on here. It's only ever stuff that I would buy or have myself. But the thing is with these companies that have now set up, if the FCA goes for a automatic compensation type scheme, whatever you do, don't get involved with these companies that are pushing for it, because it looks like they're taking a fee of 20 to 40% for what looks like is going to be doing absolutely nothing in the end up, bar keying in a couple of forms online. So careful with that one. This is going to be really interesting. I hope that you found it interesting hearing this view on it. It's a bit of a different angle, I know. And hopefully we'll get some sort of an answer as to what's going to happen with this moving forward. But it's interesting times, isn't it? And it's going to be interesting to see if this goes ahead, what detriment that's going to have to the economy, because I truly believe that the regulatory body and the government will be looking at this together going, if this goes ahead and there are a huge amount of commissions paid, what effect is that going to have on the consumer in the end run when you're having businesses fail and increase costs elsewhere? What's going to happen? It's actually really interesting. So, for the record, if you've been missold car finance, I'm sorry to hear that, and I do think it is wrong what has been happening. However, there's a massive conflict in interest here, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the back of that. Anyway, bit of a serious one for you on a weekend. So back to the stupid stuff later on in the week. Plenty of stuff coming through. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. Thank you for joining me, and I hope that you found that interesting. I'd love to hear your feedback. Drop a comment in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.